Hello and welcome to another episode of the Socially Numb Podcast. I am your host, Richie Leahy. Last week I started talking about the tech aspect behind the website itself and the podcast. And I started to get off on about a rant about the internet service providers and how the rates were being raised and things like that, and my fears with the whole business side. So I've decided to dig into a little bit more tech on the podcast. I know I had talked about like breaking tech news and starting to get more comfortable with my equipment and things like that. So for the show, I want to start to expand it and really bring home the point of the intersection between tech, gaming, and sports as a whole. So I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. So last week I talked about how I run the site on Jekyll, and originally my website used to be on WordPress. So whenever you get into the different hosting providers, if you don't want to run your own server, which I always ran Apache, and there are other options out there, but I like Ubuntu or Ubuntu, however you pronounce it. I like that operating system. It's Linux. It used to have a better interface, GUI, graphical user interface. They switched it to Unity, and it's not as lightweight, I think. It's a little bit more buggy, hefty, and I don't like that. I like my operating systems to be fast, and to the point. They used to use one called GNOME, which was sort of like a Windows XP, bare bones, highly customizable interface. But I don't mind the Unity as much, as long as it's fast, and they've been doing improvements. So I would run my own server on that, and with that I did my own file sharing at first, kind of like a media center, because when I started college, I had bought, my parents got me as like a present, and Windows Media Center Edition. I don't even remember what version of Microsoft Windows it ran, but it was very, very buggy. It had some cool ideas, like it had a TV tuner in it. And before that, we were running some Windows 95, Windows ME, like computer that was like a hand-me-down. It wasn't really a hand-me-down, but it was sort of like the past generation, because no one had computers when I first started growing up. We got when it was like a big deal. Then we got the internet, that was a big deal. And I remember Napster came out. And so that's the transition. And I might dive a little bit more into depth into that transition later. But in college, I got my own computer for the first time. And I remember it was like better than the family computer. And it was like, okay, cool. It has like this media center. I want to say it was Windows XP. And it had a TV tuner in it. And it had like Windows Media Center would let you record shows, kind of like a pre-DVR. I don't know if DVR was out at that point, but you could record like television shows. So it was pretty cool. And after a while, the operating system just quit working. And I remember Windows was like, they wouldn't renew my license. And I had this computer that was cool that had all these features. And I was like, man, what am I going to do? I was taking like computer classes. And one of the instructors, they were in a classmate, were like, hey, you should just put Linux on it. And some of your stuff might not work anymore, like the media tuner, but you won't have to pay for a new version of Windows, because it kept getting infected with viruses. And at college back then, like I let anyone use like the media server. So people would put stuff on. I know it wasn't really their fault, but the data would just get wiped or overwritten and things like that. So then I lost it all. Like my first year of college, I had a bunch of like music backed up. All my CDs were ripped at that time, back whenever you had to do that before music streaming, and a virus wiped everything out. And so I had to re-rip all my CDs, which, I mean, you're at college, I did that when I was studying, because that's just a mind-numbing. Put the disc in, rip it all over again. But I learned the hard way. And so I started to switch to Linux, and it was very brutal, a lot of command line stuff. So I taught myself a lot of the code and things like that. And I was able to set up my own file server, which then in turn led me to setting up my own website. And that's when I started to get into the web programming side of things, because at college, the curriculum doesn't really focus on web. At least back in that day, it focused on software and hardware, and I had to learn everything on my own. So that's what I did. And eventually I went from writing in pure HTML. I never really used Dreamweaver or any of those because I wrote from scratch. That's what everyone told me to do online. Like whenever I would try to look for advice, they were like, if you don't want to pay for a program, you're best just using like Notepad++, or I don't think it was before Notepad++, because I was also doing, like, when I was doing ROM hacking and stuff, I was trying to make like my own version of Tecmo Super Bowl. So I was very familiar with doing code switches. I would help update rosters and things like that on the game, update the team. Some people took a version of Tecmo Super Bowl and they they release an updated roster every year. So if you're a fan of the old Nintendo games, like, that is a real thing. So that got me into code, and I branched out into doing my own website. And for the ease of things, after I even went through and did like my own hard-coded HTML version of a website, and had an M.dot, if you know what I mean, for mobile. When smartphones first came out, I had an M.dot version of my site that I had to hard code. And it was very time consuming to go ahead and put my thoughts up and different things, sort of like a blog before a blog. And a lot of that stuff's lost online. I don't even think you can access it. I kind of grouped on my own personal site, my portfolio site that's available online. I tried to like group old posts that I still had and that were relevant into like their own category, but a lot of it I think is lost. I don't even think the Wayback Machine has my old site, that because it wasn't that well traveled. It was kind of sort of just like a portfolio site to get me jobs or programming, like website consultant positions and things like that. So I then moved, after doing all my own hand coding and setting up websites for people, into WordPress, just because it was easier for me to deploy it. And almost any provider lets you deploy a PHP or WordPress site, because you have PHP you need, and Apache ran that, and MySQL or some database. So I usually MySQL is already built in, and if they have a cPanel, you can go ahead and just deploy the website right to that. So that's what I switched to. Like GoDaddy was my first foray into that. They had like their $5 hosting, and after realizing that I could build my regular sites that I had hand built were way better than their page builder, I deployed my own, then switched to their cPanel just to host my own website, and then eventually I outgrew that. I went through a phase where I learned different, like Ruby on Rails. I got into that, and a little bit of Python with Django as I did grad school work. Most of my work I did in Python or Ruby, because scripting with that is much easier. It's clean, nice clean language, and it's fast to write, so I don't have to worry about like the PHP, writing the semantics of curly braces and like all the extra comma at the end of each line, or semicolon, whatever it is. So I didn't have to worry about all that. I just went ahead and put up my own WordPress. I had my own theme. I started to use like built-in themes for a while. One of the companies I worked for, they had like pre-purchased themes or whatever that once they purchased them, you're free to use commercially, whatever, your own leisure. So I adopted some of them, made it a little bit more responsive. And then for my own site, recently I used a mix of WordPress 2014. So it's about 2 years old. I liked their menu and the way it worked for accessibility. That was a big thing for me, is making the menu accessible and the whole site accessible, because then anyone with disabilities or handicaps were able to visit the site, because I didn't want to exclude anyone. If they stumbled upon my site and they wanted to check it, or if I was going for a web position, I wanted to make sure that that was something that I could point out, like, hey, check this, try to navigate some other website with just the keyboard. So 2014 was really well for that. And that's actually the only piece of JavaScript besides like the standard analytics tracking and features that most people use. The only thing that I use JavaScript for is the accessible navigation. And if they let me get rid of that, that'll be great. So I'm not a big fan of having like extra JavaScript. And you know, if you look at my site, there's not really any animations or anything like that. I just want a fast loading site. So hopefully Socially Numb delivers. I try to keep it clean, sort of like a new age magazine look to it and look and feel. So I took that 2014 and I took the grid styles of Bootstrap and I kind of crushed it all together. And that's where the theme comes. So as I stripped out features, you might see a lot of changes and you might see fonts and spacing that look off. That's because I'm trying to get as much of the extra code out as possible because I want the site to load as fast as possible for anyone who's on mobile, tablets, and then that way you can share. And I'm adding in features for social share now as I try to get the show syndicated on networks that I have. Dad Strength, my other podcast, has been up now for a while on syndication, and Socially Numb is just starting to get picked up. So I'll start to advertise that here in another week or two once it's official and I have everything up on the website. So I've been putting more things up, getting everything cleaned up. If you notice any issues or errors on the site, please let me know. I run it through a validator check, so most of the stuff should be supported. I know there are some outliers with, if you use Windows Internet Explorer, I don't want to be the guy that just laughs and says, well, don't use Internet Explorer. But if that's your only browser and you're having issues, let me know. I need to know what browser you use, what operating system, and what version. So like if you're using Internet Explorer or actually Google Chrome, I'm more familiar with. If you go up to the About, it will tell you what version number. Or under Settings, I think it's right at the top. Version number. So send me that and I'll try to make sure that I can make changes to the site so that it works for you. So if you notice anything like that, let me know because I want to make the improvements and I want to make the site as accessible to as many people as possible. And same with WordPress. I didn't want, up to this point, I was using WordPress for all my hosting, and then you have to maintain a database. You have revisions on the posts, and then I have to worry about it loading. I've had trouble with certain loading and response time not from WordPress, but because I don't want to have to pay for extra solid state hosting and then have to deal with that. So I found another solution that worked out pretty well. And then I'm really starting to get around to loving for my site right now. So with my Ruby experience, I heard about a thing called Jekyll, which is a static site generator. And you can use like the Ruby templating system, very similar to Ruby on Rails. Their templating system, it might even be based off that, I don't know. Well, some of the Ruby on Rails stuff I've done, which was a while ago, so it might be quite different now. But the templating system they had, you would build your templates. So I was able to load in my Bootstrap 2014 theme. I actually updated it to the latest version of Bootstrap, so I kind of started all over for this one. I wanted to make sure that I had any improvements in this one that they made for my new site. But I kept the 2014 menu. It has the keyboard stuff. If they ever update it for AMP, Google AMP now, that's my other improvement that I looked at, because then Google will load the podcast or so when I covered All Things Open, I just got those posts up on the site, but I wanted a little bit more insight. And as I'm rolling out the site, more of that stuff will come. And Google AMP would be another feature with the rich pins I brought up last week on social media. If you share a story, or if I go out to a conference, take some pictures, talk about it on the podcast, I put that on there, you share it on social media, that information will show up. And Google AMP is a version of that. So what Google did was they created a set of strict standards and different sites that are hosted on their servers. So they have cached versions of your site, and AMP is very minimal, so that instead of loading like your own JavaScript files, you use their JavaScript files. Instead of having your own YouTube embed code, you put the link and use like amp.youtube or amp.soundcloud or whatever you're using. And Google will already use the cached version closest to the user. So if the user's on the East Coast, they'll find their own server on the East Coast and load the file directly. so your site will load almost instantly, and it's great for mobile. But my problem is still, at least up to the point, if you know of an example of an accessible menu, drop-down, mobile responsive menu that's Google AMP, let me know, and I'll play around with it. I might make the upgrade. Because right now, with Jekyll, I don't have a plugin that I can deploy. I know there are some out there for Jekyll that lets you use AMP, but I don't pay for hosting right now with the Socially Numb podcast. I have the podcast themselves, the MP3 files, hosted at a different provider with Amazon S3, the free tier right now, and their hosting's pretty cheap, but the that's just for storage. The actual website itself is hosted on GitHub. GitHub has their own pages where if you have a repository, they'll let you deploy a website for free. And it just ended up using Jekyll. And since I was messing around with it, I was able to deploy my site right there on GitHub and use their servers for hosting. So it's kind of the same idea behind Google AMP, where you have a restricted platform that's fast because it's using flat files. GitHub has like their own size restriction. So your site can't be over, I think it's a gigabyte in file size. So your media has to be hosted elsewhere. And that's where I'm using Amazon S3. I could also host it on Google Drive or something, but with podcasts, that might put me over my size limit. I think you could also host on Dropbox. Dropbox gives you free size up to a few gigabytes, and it depends on how long I would keep the podcast going. I could also do SoundCloud. I think you have to pay. Yeah, I know you have to pay to have like unlimited storage up to a certain length. And so I'm trying to keep all my episodes available, and that might change in the future, depending if I do have to switch from Amazon, because right now I just signed up for the free tier, and I might have to switch to the pay tier if I'm using extra storage. And that all depends on how many downloads I'm getting and if I ever draw over that limit. Because most people, I know some other that use it to host podcasts, and it only costs them a couple pennies a month. So if that's all it costs, then I'll just stick with that. And the GitHub pages, I've been very, very happy with, because GitHub is already, they have enough servers. They kind of have an infrastructure, not quite as large as Google, but they do have their own version. And like I said, you're locked down. And that's where I'm still trying to expand and bring in different things and different features. So I've been playing around with different scripts, trying to bring in like a database aspect. So with my MLB payroll, that's where I've hit my snag. I can do tables right in the files themselves. But if I want to expand it, I'm looking at database. So if I have a SQLite file, which is what I have my data in now, and I try to pull that information, I need that to be able to be read by Jekyll. And it's not like a normal scripting language where it's calling. It's already created the static files. So I might have to run the script myself on my local computer. I know I can upload the DB file. I've already tested it in like a sample repository, but I might have to pull and deploy it locally and then just back up my files on GitHub and have a script write to the HTML file. But that's what I'm working on, trying to expand that, because I like the flat files. I like how fast they are. But if I'm doing like some other scripting and trying to expand for the show itself, trying to do the MLB payroll comparison, and if I'm going to go ahead and expand into different sports and compare that, then yeah, I'm going to need to expand the site a little bit more. And I don't want to have another server just for random database stuff that I'm doing. So that's what I'm digging into. And the other thing that I'm looking at is calendar. If I have a calendar of like events and I'm trying to embed it on an HTML page, there is not a good solution for calendaring. And that's anywhere. Even WordPress, like they have plugins for calendar and they're not that good either. So that's one thing where if you're an entrepreneur and you want to go ahead and create something that's in an area of need, look into creating a calendar, a standalone calendar even where people can submit events and you can approve them with the click of a button. You can go back through and edit events, kind of like a community calendar, share feeds between different calendars, and maybe pull from there. I mean, maybe I can do that with Jekyll. So I don't know. I haven't tested that either. But that's kind of where I'm at, digging around in this newer tech. Because today's tech, you want your site to be secure. Nothing's more secure than flat files. And that is even more true if I do get rid of the JavaScript and don't really have to use any scripting at all. That's great. If I can switch to Google AMP and have the flat files and its own little specifications where it's only showing me certain bits of information, that's great too. I have a site that's fast, accessible. Anyone can go ahead and get my content. They can read my write-ups. They can download the podcast, listen to it. I have Discuss set up. So if you want to make comments, feel free to go ahead and chat right there. You can also email me. I've thought about doing different things. Once I get the guests rolling, if I ever bring guests on the show, that's my other technical thing. But I'm trying to make it as, I don't want to say low budget because I have pretty good gear. I'll probably go through my gear one episode or two, but I want to make sure that I have the technical stuff down so that the podcast sounds good and it's available on as many platforms as possible. And it does have a nice site that lets it go ahead and get the information out to a wider audience. And that's where I'm at right now. The calendar, I've looked at using Google Calendar. Google lets you embed it, and I'm looking at styling. So that's my next big foray into it. And if I can get some type of static version with that to pull in, and other image hosting, there are a ton of free image hosts. So as I do the image for posts, I don't host them on GitHub. I can put them on different sites, and then you just go ahead and embed the link, the URL they give you. And I mean, there are any type of cloud storage systems, which I'll probably dig into. I've said previously that I used Linux. That's the one very, very huge positive in my eyes for Dropbox, because they have the client that is supported by Linux. So if you do want a pro version of software, and I'm not endorsed by them in any way, I just like it because they support Linux. Google Drive has been saying that they are going to have a Linux client for years, and I've never seen one. I've seen pictures of it. I mean, it might be out there now. I haven't checked in a few months, but I do know that they always talk about having one. Some of their internals use it to share files. You can access it in a browser, yeah, but you don't have the active sync where if there's a file you have in a folder on your computer, you make a change, it automatically syncs like Dropbox does. Dropbox does have the Linux client. And so I put a big plus on their end. And another one that like doesn't, for example, would be like Evernote. I used to use Evernote. They don't have a Linux client. It frustrated me. So then I switched to like Google Keep, which doesn't have a client for either. But I just wanted something that I was able to access in a way that gave me my notes at a moment's notice. And then I switched to Google Docs anyway, because it gives me a little bit more free flowing features for notes. I do really like Microsoft OneNote, and I wish that they would expand that. I know they kind of took features away, and which is a frustrating disappointment. And I know that they have an Android version, but if they would go ahead and put that on Linux as kind of a standalone program, they're like, hey, use OneDrive. They want people to use OneDrive. If they had a Linux client, that could make me get some points in their favor. I mean, that's one of the strikes against iCloud, besides people getting hacked on iCloud, is you have limited support across systems. And I like to have all my information accessible no matter what computer I buy. I don't want what software I can run to be the deciding factor in which computer I buy. If I find a Linux computer that looks great, has all the specs I want to be able to buy that. Same with a Mac or a Windows PC. So that's a little bit more digging into the tech side of things on how I'm running right now, where I'm going, why I have it set up like that. If you've seen inconsistencies over the past few weeks, I've been trying to get the website stripped out so that it's not loading extra files whenever you visit the site. And some of them are very small, but if you're on a mobile device, and even if you don't have 4G, I've been there, I've lived it. I've gone to stay places where you don't have 4G coverage, and I've tried to load my site, my old site. I know how brutal it was, and I know others that are way, way worse. So I'm trying to do my best to make it out there. So hey, if you like reading the site, like listening to the podcast, I'm doing my best to try to keep it lightweight and accessible so that it works. It just works. That's my goal. Just make sure that the website works and you're able to get the content. I can put it out there. I'll keep putting the content out there, trying to get it to improve. That's my goal. Now, moving on, in the same thing, trying to get things to improve. I've been looking at doing video game streams on Twitch. I've played around with it before. It wouldn't be under necessarily the Socially Numb banner. Right now, I'll probably put it under my personal YouTube after it runs on Twitch, because Twitch is under my personal account. I might link to it though from my contributor page on sociallynumb.com, and I have that set up because I want that with the rich media pins, the search results that show like the picture of the site, and people can share it, and it actually loads a little bit of the article on social media. That's the next aspect of it, is to go ahead and have like links for your author. And with Google Plus, you can have a contributor, and then Google will show that in their search results. And I know Google Plus has kind of changed after it kind of died. I don't know if it's actually dead, but that was one of the suggestions they had. I don't know if it's true, but I've been working on that, along with like the final touches on syndication and getting the feeds up to snuff, trying to do maybe some Facebook instant articles and some Apple News, which I brought up before as being pre-approved, getting some articles reviewed and seeing if they'll go ahead and put it in there. They might not, because I guess it's not really 100% news. I'm having more of coverage of things, but it's not like an everyday news source, which is what Apple News seems to kind of pull. On the other hand, I did look at Feedly, which is an RSS feed, another source that I thought, oh, this is kind of an underground thing that would be very, very cool to put the site on. But they didn't have ongoing maintenance, it looked like. So they had a contributor, kind of like a publisher page, where you can go ahead and submit your site to Feedly. And Feedly is an RSS program that you add feeds to, RSS feeds, and it pulls and tells you what the newest articles are. And it's probably not the best for large news sites. It's like if I was following ESPN, they publish dozens, if not hundreds of articles a day. Feedly's probably not the best for that. But for following like small independent publishers, it's been great so far. And I noticed that some of them have little images in like a publisher page or like a publication page. And it said to get that, you have to contact them. So I followed their instructions, have all of my feed set up to include their specifications, their images, their own thing. And I haven't heard back. And this has been a couple weeks. I did this when I did the Apple News. I just didn't bring it up because it slipped my mind. So if you know who runs Feedly and you like the podcast, let me know. I'm trying to get some extra coverage on that. It looks like the apps are still updated. I've been playing around with them still. And like I said, I enjoy them. I have some other people in the industry that I like to follow that publish not multiple times a day, kind of like on my schedule, once a day at most. And it's nice to be able to see like, hey, if they publish a new article, boom, right there, I can click on it, it takes me to their site, and I can read the new article. So I've been trying to add that feature in. I might put a link to it on the site somewhere for people who want to stay up to date. They don't really listen to the podcast, but they want to read my insights, some of the reviews and games and things that I do. They can go ahead and do that. But that's my rep round on that. And today, for gaming, I'm going to go ahead and dive right into I was talking about Twitch a little bit. I've looked at expanding that into Twitch. I know I kind of got off on a tangent there on Feedly, but with Twitch, I thought about doing some of my gamings where I noticed a lot of people on there broadcast like the current game or whatever is sponsored by esports. And it's not really so much that I don't have the time to invest in esports or put into it. It's just probably I missed it. A little bit too old for it, kind of hit after me. I do like the idea of streaming games. So I want to kind of put that out there that I've done it before. I've started to do a little bit more of it. Twitch doesn't keep them around. So I've been looking at linking my profile with YouTube and maybe putting it up on my personal page. And I might link to it on my contributor page here on sociallynumb.com, where you can watch some of my YouTube games and YouTube videos of me playing games. And my only downside is a lot of my free PlayStation Plus games right now I've been playing on the PlayStation 3. But I do like how if I go ahead and redeem it on the PlayStation 3, it shows up in my library on the PlayStation 4. I think I talked about that last week. I'm not sure if I made that clear. So each month on the PlayStation, you go ahead and it gives you at least one free game. Normally two, at least in my experience. And that's it. I might be missing one. There might be more than that. But I have been able to pick 2 games on the PlayStation 4 every month since I started doing this a couple months ago. And I've had the PlayStation Plus subscription before. I just never looked for games because I don't know. I had other games that I was playing. I like to beat all the games I buy. So I've been having a backlog of games from when I was a graduate student. So now I have games that I've been beating, and I've been looking to expand out, but I don't like to pay and buy a game that people only play for a few weeks. Talked about that before on the podcast. So in the meantime, as I buy a game like Doom, I still play Doom online, but now I want other games, and I don't want to go ahead and buy like the next Call of Duty, Battlefield, games that are the same to games I already own. But I do like to play a variety of games. Artsy games, doesn't matter. So that's where I have the PlayStation Plus. They give you free games, even if I don't like them. Like the first one I talked about on here was Datura. Did not like it. Some people might have thought it was cool. It might just be that I played it years after it was released, but at least I had a chance to play it for free. And I'm pretty sure PlayStation probably throws the publishers a few bones for having it listed under the PlayStation Plus games to get for free. But that's what I've been kind of playing. And also games on Steam. But see, I haven't looked at streaming straight from my computer. All the streams I've done have been from the PlayStation 4. Me playing Doom. Me playing Doom with some friends. And then I played Assassin's Creed Chronicles. I had videos of those. And I don't think those are on my YouTube. I don't think I had everything linked up. I kind of did it as a test before I started the podcast. And now I'm going to kind of circle back through and start to do that more and more. Just to kind of get different things out there to show that I play. I wouldn't classify myself as like a pro gamer. Maybe back in the day, I'd be pretty good at certain games. But now I'm more of a casual gamer. It's tough to admit that. But that's probably where my skill level is. And so I'll probably do some speedruns and things. But I don't like playing the same games that everyone else plays. And so I want to kind of build it around the games that you can get for free. So like, hey, if you see a game that I'm playing and go through, I encourage you to redeem the games. You're already paying for the service. So why not take advantage of it? Even if you only play the free game a little bit, you don't beat it. Play it. There's some cool ones out there. Transformers Devastation I've been playing. What else? I get confused. Some of the games I pay and buy on sale that I play. I think Resident Evil, the remake, was on there. Yeah, that was one of the ones I got. I think it was like the October Halloween one. So that's been pretty cool. To play that, because I haven't played the whole thing because I never actually owned it. I've played other people's versions, but I've never owned the game myself, so I haven't beat it. So that's pretty cool that I can do that now. and like games like Journey and Lords of the Fallen, I believe. So that's what I've been doing. I also looked at playing maybe one of those massive multiplayer online games, but it depends because I'm having fun playing the free games I get, and it's easier for me to stream them than to be, it's easier to be one stream of a rare game where there's not that many than to be one of like a million streams playing the most popular free-to-play game on the PlayStation or on Twitch or anything like that. So that's where I'm at. I've been doing that a little bit. I haven't linked at anything on sociallynumb.com, but I'm probably going to start to talk about it as I play it more, the certain games. And with that, my downside is I can't really stream on the PlayStation 3. So as I beat the games on PlayStation 3 that I had for a while, I just haven't been able to go ahead and get that hooked up with Twitch, and I'm probably not going to buy a streaming recording box to do it. So that will probably limit some of the games I talk about. I have been publishing little reviews and things on sociallynumb.com. If you've come across it, I encourage you to check it out. Give me feedback, make some comments, let me know. If you think they're garbage, hopefully you don't just say they're garbage, like, oh, this is a joke, or whatever. Go ahead and give me some constructive feedback, and I'll make some improvements. Let me know what you want to see. If you want to see other games, if you're some of the older ones I might have, I could try to do speedruns of. That's probably what I'm going to end up doing with some of my Steam games. I have like the old Turok on there that they remade, so I might try to do a speedrun of that, which my speedrun nowadays, after having played Turok for years, decades, that's a scary thought. It's probably going to be pretty tough, plus it's a remake, so I don't know what will be different. But I'll be streaming those. Might throw some links up, either on my contributor page or on the social media for Socially Numb, so follow us on there. I've been putting more and more stuff out, so something cool to look at. The first game that I did, I've been going back through and playing my old PlayStation 3 games. And since I can't stream them, I've been writing about them. I put up my little write-up on Datura, which I already talked about. And that was what gave me the start. They gave me a short game to play through, kind of like a review of like a demo. But it's a cool idea, something to get started. Then I went through and played. I had a flight simulator game called Sturmvik IL-2. I'm probably mispronouncing and butchering that, so it's probably best that I don't talk about it on the podcast. But that was a pretty cool game, and these are all games I got for cheap. So like, think gaming on a budget. You have an old system laying around, you want a cool flying game, I would check it out. I tried to play on the actual simulator. It was brutal, was no fun. For me, anyway. If you're really into flying, I do like flying in planes. I wish I had my own pilot license, but it's just too hard to like try to fight in the middle of a firefight in a plane when it takes all the strength and mental capacity you have just to keep the plane flying straight. So I ripped through that, I think, on arcade or flight simulator. It wasn't whatever the flight simulator one I play. So like I said, I'm more of a casual gamer, so I usually play on normal. Sometimes I'll play on hard if it's a game that I like or that I've played before. And I don't really chase trophies. So if you look at my trophy count, it's pretty high, but I think that's just because of more of the game. I play more games. So the number of games I play, not how long I spent trying to master them. And I'm not really so much of the story either. And that's one of the other things I really like the PlayStation 4, where they have the headphone right in the controller, because I can sit back in my chair, focus on the game. It gives you that surround sound type of feel. And I know it's not really surround sound because it's stereo. You have two headphones, but you have the real feel that you're in the game. You can actually hear which side the fire is coming from if you're in the middle of a battle. Some gunfire, boom. You can look, oh, that's coming to my right. Look around there. You also have like the immersion. So I do like that a lot. I kind of rigged it up for my PlayStation 3 so that I can listen to on headphones. I have headphone extender from when I'm doing like the podcast to listen to it on the headphones while I do it. So I have a really long cable that I have So I have the PlayStation 3 video come out through HDMI, and I have the audio come out through the AV cable, and I use that, the red-yellow cable, component cable, I guess. I don't know what I said, AV. So the component cable, I have the red-yellow, or red-white for right and left, and I put those into a converter that converts it to the headphone cable, and then I plug that into a headphone extender cable that's like 18 feet, and then I have that plugged into a set of headphones that I can pull all the way back to my couch, because 18 feet is pretty far, and I listen to the games like that, and it's a pretty cool setup, even though it's much easier on the PlayStation 4 to just plug a set of headphones right into the controller, but I like to play like that, and I've been doing that more, and that's actually how I can record some of the voiceover stuff or the talking during Twitch videos when I record them. So that's what I've been doing. And the second thing with that is the fight game, or the second game, I guess not the second thing. The next game that I beat recently was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Danger of the Ooze. I think that was the title of it. And that was a pretty cool game. I think it was made for the Game Boy, maybe the Nintendo 3DS. And it was also for the PlayStation 3 is what I played it on. I don't know if it's on PlayStation Network. It wasn't a free game. I picked it up on sale. So that was one of the ones that I played. I really liked. It was kind of a throwback, not to like the arcade Turtles games, but to the original NES Turtles game, where it was 2D multi-level layers. So you can go like upstairs, downstairs. The enemies spawned based on when you and where you entered the level. So if I would go into a building, enemies would spawn. If I leave the building, come back in, enemies would spawn again. So you can like build up your stats, and you can like level your guys up. It was only one player though, which was the same setup as the 3DS, or not the 3DS, the NES game. Single player. Kind of a bummer now though that it wasn't multiplayer. And they might have multiplayer online. I actually don't know. I was looking more for local multiplayer, which almost no one does anymore. And that's what will be interesting to see if someone has that, because I still like having that option as a local multiplayer, because then you can play, even if it's not a split screen. I would like a console, this would be my dream, that lets you have two outputs for multiplayer. So it would be two player multiplayer, so that you would have some type of splitter where it might have two HDMI outputs, kind of like a computer that has dual screens, that you would have that from your console, one right, one left. And because imagine this, think of like the Wii U or the Nintendo 3DS. You have the two screens. One of them is your game, and the other one's usually like your map or your items. Think if you had a living room setup where you had two 40-inch televisions, and one of them was the game, and the other screen was like all your other items, your inventory, things like that. You could swap. I don't know. The PlayStation 4 has like the touch thing on the middle. You can go ahead and use that to control your other screen, to like move a mouse or something, a cursor. I don't know. They'd be creative with it. But just think if you had two screens, and then if you wanted to play multiplayer, it would just load up both screens. So player number 2 would be on the second television. And I mean, I guess they could get crazy and have 4 televisions if you wanted 4-player multiplayer. But I don't think people get together and play games like that anymore. I wonder what it would be like if you did two, like if you had the 2 television output and you try to like pitch it that people would buy 2 televisions, which I'd imagine the developers of televisions would get behind. And so you had the 2 output from the console for 2 different televisions, and depending on if the games used it, you could use both, or you didn't even have to use both. It might only feed one, like this game only supports 1 monitor, whatever, click. Then I just change the input from my second TV, put on a football game or something while I play video games. 2 screens in a living room, it would be awesome. And then if someone comes over and I want to play Mario Kart, so like this is an idea for Nintendo, since they think they're struggling in the console wars, but they have the 2 televisions, you have the option to play multiplayer. So like, let's say I load up the second controller. It says a second controller has been detected. And would you like to add the second screen? Click yes, boom. You have two screens. You're on the left, your buddy's on the right. You can switch back and forth. Kind of like back in the old NES days or the Nintendo 64 days where you had to position yourself. You're playing GoldenEye, you had to position yourself so you could see your spot on the television. With the big screen TVs, I think a 4-player makes it kind of a little bit too tough because you have television set up. Living rooms are kind of more expanded because the televisions are so big that usually you're used to sitting back far away. Where when you would play multiplayer before, I remember being huddled like in front of a smaller television just so you could see what was going on. And most living rooms aren't set up like that. So if you wanted to do that, you would have to kind of pull your couch up closer to your television so everyone could see their mini screen and do like screen peeking or whatever. But you could also pull all the way up a chair, or if you sit on the floor, most televisions now I feel like they're mounted on the wall, so your neck's crooked from looking up to watch your multiplayer game. I just don't think it would work. But I do think that's a cool idea. And the other thing would be, I don't know how screen mirroring, how that technology has gone, where you could also have a computer or something that displays it. And the Nintendo Switch might do this. I don't know, because it looked like they had like a little screen and your controller was wirelessly connected to it and you had it out on the go. So if you had two televisions, what if someone else had a Switch and you could play multiplayer in the same room with each person having their own screen? So it would be like you're bringing your own handheld console, you prop yours up on a table, they sit across from you and you play back and forth like a shooting game. Or I think they showed in the preview that you're playing like basketball. I think that would be cool. And then if the main one, so like Nintendo, your console's not out yet, please make it support like dual televisions. You already have the 3DS technology. Let 2. I guess, yeah, 4-player would work. You have 4 people sitting on like each side of a table and they're all playing Super Smash Brothers. That would be cool. Now, I don't know how that would work wirelessly if you have multiple screens going at the same time. I don't even know if that's a support. I don't know. I haven't watched the Switch promo in a while. But that's what I would like to see. And I don't know what brought that on. But Nintendo, the Turtle game doesn't have it. I know that's what I was talking about, was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was only single player. It was cool. I like the idea how if your turtle died, they had the rescue rooms. The original Nintendo game had that. So you had to go in and unlock your guy. And I think they had the power-ups. I know they had the extra weapons, like the shurikens you could get, and you would carry them, and I think they had different ones to play through the game. I haven't beat that game for a long, long time. But I had fun playing Danger of the Ooze. It was a little bit different and tried not to be too much. It showed homage to that older game, but it wasn't trying to recreate it or only try to be a ripoff of it. So I really had fun playing it. The Shredder match was pretty challenging, although once you figured out what you had to do, it was pretty easy. But up to that point, it was a challenge. It wasn't like a super, super challenge. I've seen some people complain about getting ripped to shreds with the turtles, but I found out that just exploring the game, that I leveled up my guys pretty good, and I didn't really have any trouble until figuring out what to do with the Shredder match. I had an idea once I saw the electricity kick in, and I knew like, oh man, I probably have to hit Shredder into those. I just needed to know how. I know they said something about you had like the special moves. You pointed the arrow, and then that's which way you'd push Shredder. I don't know if you didn't do the upgrades. I saw there was a trophy for it, but I'm not one to collect all the trophies, so I didn't try for it. I leveled up the game. I like exploring the game and trying to beat it without using like codes or trying to do follows or maps. I think they do like maps for trophies, trophy maps or something, road maps maybe they're called. So I don't really follow those. But those are the games. I've been posting them up on the site. As I try to do more, I'll get more up. So keep an eye out for those. Hope you like them. Right now, so like I've been picking my games based on if they're free for PlayStation or if they're like really cheap for Steam. and I've been trying to get them up on Twitch. So if you see any that you see on sale for Steam, please let me know. Hit me up on social media. I've been getting those accounts rolling, getting more of the content up. So that's been pretty cool. And then for sports, that's what I've been working on, is getting the Jekyll stuff read, the database, trying to get the Major League Baseball payroll up. Not really in a hurry, as the World Series is already over, and I had the information that I needed for the World Series. The Cubs had the higher payroll. They ended up winning. Not to bring that up every podcast, but that's what I was looking at. And so now I'm trying to build it in a presentable way so that it will be on the site. And once I get that rolling, I'll try to find other information for the other leagues. And so that would be pretty much the stories I'm sharing. I'm hoping that I can use that information and Apple will accept it and start to publish it on Apple News. And then that will be a whole nother avenue to get the podcast out and about, because that would be cool. College football closing in on a couple more weeks of the season. We'll be having probably around Thanksgiving, so another week or two, I'll start to get heavy into it, because we'll have the conference champions. Some of this other cloudiness with the playoff committee will be sorted out as we get closer here, and we'll do some deep dives into that. I know I want to do a Black Friday thing for tech and gaming, any deals, and that's right about the time when Cyber Monday and I think the college football conference championship games are. So that'll be an exciting time coming up. Good to talk about that. And the NFL, teams are starting to separate themselves. We'll start to do like eliminators. The Browns were pretty much done a few weeks ago. They're a mess as a franchise. So look at those. Each franchise, hopefully I can get the payroll thing going, so I can look at the payroll, what they need to do, that they need to just clean house, what are their chances of coming back next year as a franchise, and what direction are they moving in? Which teams are contenders? Are they going to be a one-hit wonder, or are they going to have a chance to contend for years to come? And so now that teams are starting to distance themselves and separate themselves, probably dig into that. I looked at getting some more NHL coverage, but with the Hurricanes here and Raleigh being blacked out, that's probably not going to happen, because I'm not going to pay for NHL TV and not be able to watch a game. Same thing with the NBA TV or NBA League Pass or whatever they call it. I just don't like the blacked out games. I don't have cable, and they consider, at least based on my research, I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, please let me know. But it looks like that if the game's on cable, then it can be blacked out. And I don't pay for cable, so then I would have to pay for League Pass or NHL TV and cable to get the games. So it doesn't make any sense. So it's kind of a bummer, and it was something that I was hoping that I'd be able to do. And I wished, I mean, you're paying for one. I know that they have the agreements in place, and they have to get that money because it helps the leagues with exposure and things. But I really wish that they would just have an all-in-one, even if it was a per-team basis where, hey, you can go ahead and pay $80. I don't even know what the prices are for the League Pass and stuff. But if you paid for one team, you could watch all their games no matter if they were on regular TV or not. That's the direction it's going. Who cares if you watch it on ABC or CBS or Fox or NBC, one of the big channels, or if you watch it streamed online? It doesn't matter. You're watching your team if you get to see them. And that's why it's hard when some people are like loyal to professional teams. I just don't grasp that. I know you might live near them. I could see if you live near them and you have season tickets, you go to a bunch of the games, you see the players all the time. Yeah, you can be loyal. But it's very hard if you don't live in the immediate vicinity. Like people around here, the Raleigh area, how can they be Bobcat fans when are you really sitting around watching them? I can watch ESPN and I see more LeBron James stuff, Golden State Warriors stuff than I do Bobcats. I barely see any Bobcats coverage. So it makes me think that there are no not really any hardcore Bobcats fans around here because it's very hard to pick up. I guess they're the Hornets now, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Charlotte Hornet fans around here. I guess when I went to see a game there, they were called the Bobcats. So that's probably why it's sticking with me. But maybe if they change their name, when they change them back to the Hornets, maybe they should have been the Carolina Hornets. Then they would have been a little bit more apt to get coverage, maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't think that in the NBA there's not that many superstars or like super great players to go around. And once they're on teams, those are the teams that are going to get the coverage. And I think it's just a sign of the sport. I don't think there's anything else they can really do about it. And it's not really a cyclical thing because certain teams can attract the free agents and others can't. So it's just something they're going to struggle with as a sport with so many teams. There's not that many great players to go around. So they don't have the parity. Salary cap doesn't seem to be helping that. Now that players can just kind of team up with each other and go with whoever their buddies are. And that's who they play with. So now that's it. We'll be digging into that, hoping to get those up on the site. And keep an eye out for them. Share them. Tell your friends about them. I might do like little gambling sheets. I talked about that before. But again, the podcast isn't the best to put that out. I think I've said about maybe doing picks, like if I release the podcast on Monday, the picks on Thursday. But I understand some people might not listen to the podcast till the following weekend. And so if I'm going to do picks, I'll either do maybe YouTube vids or Facebook Live maybe. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do if I ever do those. If not, I'll just do them on social media. Maybe just tweet out an image of the picks, count them up, put them on the site under my contributor page, show what I'm doing, what my picks are for the year. But not sure. Something I'm looking into, and there'll be more to come. So if you have any suggestions, let me know. Reach out to me. Thank you for listening. You have been listening to Socially Numb with Richie Leahy.